Since 1934, Iowa's farmers have turned to the Iowa Farm Bureau Spokesman as their trusted news source. Now, the Spokesman speaks. Listen in and hear from leading experts on topics important to farmers and agriculture. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to the June 1st edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Delaney Howell, and today's episode concerns the question that is absolutely top of mind for livestock farmers right now. As meat processing plants struggle to keep up with farmer demand, where can farmers turn to market their livestock? For insights into that difficult question, we turned to Terry Kerns, who's the co-owner of Eastern Iowa's popular Edgewood Locker, and Dr. Kathryn Polking, who is the bureau chief for the Iowa Department of Agriculture's Meat and Poultry Inspection. Let's start off here first with Terry Kerns, who was in the midst of running his family's successful locker in Edgewood when COVID-19 showed up in Iowa and turned things upside down. Spokesman writer Corey Munson has the story. Take it away, Corey.
How has the COVID situation impacted your business?
From the custom aspect of the business, immediately the farmers needed a place to go for their animals because the markets weren't there. So anyway, the phone started ringing off the wall on wanting to slaughter more hogs and beef. Typically this time of year is our slowest time of the year. Usually they could call up and get one right in. Within a few days, we are booked out months, and right now we're actually booking beef for April and hogs into March.
Tell me a little bit about your relationship with your farmer customers. So you have guys that you work with normally, and some of these guys have unfortunately not been able to get their animals in here to you.
Yeah, that's been really hard because we do have a lot of great loyal customers, and we obviously are doing our best to get them all in. We're certainly not getting them in as quickly as we'd like. We are developing a waiting list in case of cancellations, in case of us being able to ramp up our production a little bit better, that we're still hopeful that we can help most of these people out. And right now, we're just really unsure exactly how many of them we're going to be able to get snuck in. There's just that much gray area out there. I do think that some of this panic booking, of down the road months and months, I think that there are some of those that are booked in there that probably were booked in the heat of the moment, and maybe they'll end up selling that animal, or maybe the person that now these markets are coming back a little bit and the beef are gaining value again, maybe they won't want as many, but I'm hopeful that it'll level out here to some point, but I do think that we are going to be in a trend with less and less lockers and custom processing available. I do see this extended booking way ahead, probably the new norm.
So have you gotten any calls from guys curious about slaughtering at their farms, what they can do?
Sure. We've seen quite a bit of that, and understandably so. I mean, they had no choice. If they wanted an animal butchered, that was about the only choice they had, because obviously we're not the only locker in this situation. I think everybody's pretty similarly booked out. So we have seen a lot of that. And the main thing is food safety, is we tell them, we can only do, obviously we're just talking to them, we're not, part of it. And I think it was a little bit easier the past few weeks when it was colder. I'm hopeful that anybody that's doing that now has refrigeration available, because we're certainly getting to a point where you got to watch that temperature. I mean, it's pretty easy to do when it's cold out, but when the temperatures aren't getting very cold at night, you want to be very careful doing that.
Have you heard any talk around the state of, reinforcing the locker system? Folks maybe wanting to get into the business because of this situation?
Not specifically because of this situation. I think it is brought to highlight that there is probably a shortage of lockers, but it's kind of a business cycle. I mean, I think there is somewhat a shortage because it's not easy. We've been fortunate. We're busy. We've got an amazing staff, and we're lucky things are going well. But it's not a simple business to get into. Most of the lockers right now that I'm familiar with are family businesses, kind of like a lot of the farming. If you grew up in it, so you understand it, and you just continued on. It's kind of a rare occasion to have somebody out of the blue go up and build a new locker. Kind of like the farming situation, whereas there used to be a lot of farms that milked 20 cows, had a farrowing house with maybe 30 sows in it. A lot of these smaller lockers did minimal amounts too. It's just in today's world, you got to have volume to be able to make it. So to start up a small locker that could be somewhat manageable financially is really hard to even be able to crunch the numbers, So it'll be interesting. I know there's just a shortage out there. And I know one real shortage out there is in the private label business, where a lot of these farmers wanted to market their own Wagyu beef or Berkshire hog. And we used to do some of that. We just got to the point where we didn't have any more time. And there's a super shortage in processing like that. So there's definitely a shortage out there. I guess I don't want to necessarily entice too many people to go in competition with me. But I think there is a need out there for more processing facilities.
I think this one thing the virus has taught us, that being local and being part of your community is one of the safer ways to go about this, maybe, than consolidating everything into a couple spots that something could go wrong.
Definitely, and actually in our industry, the locker business, over the years, there's been a lot of years it was down. You go to conventions and it was doom and gloom. And over the past few years now, even before the COVID, the whole, local meat, local processing, that whole movement has been rolling along pretty strong. So now that this COVID thing has pounced upon it too, it's really brought a highlight to it. We've been talking about an addition for the last 3 or 4 years even. We finally got our land bought this last fall, and we're actually moving dirt in right now. So we're planning an addition. It's just right now is to figure out exactly what direction that addition is going to go and what our exact plan will be in the future.
So for farmers who are struggling and calling around, do you have any advice for them what they should do?
Probably my best advice would be is your local butcher is your best option, in my opinion. Again, because it's a bad situation, because everybody can only do so much, but there's just not many options out there unless dusting off the knives, and that's not easy either.
Well, I think I can speak for all of us when I say thank you to Terry and all of the other folks who are running small family-owned lockers around the state. We certainly know that the demand is there. We appreciate everything you're doing to help farm families find processing options during this difficult time. Not surprisingly, as you heard Terry mention there, running a locker is not an easy task. And there are definitely important food safety rules and considerations to keep in mind if you're looking into that direct marketing path. For those specific questions, we bring in Dr. Kathryn Polking, who is the Bureau Chief for the Iowa Department of Agriculture's Meat and Poultry Inspection Bureau. Her bureau oversees the inspection of small processing operations that sell meat here in Iowa. Farm Bureau's Caitlin Lamb had a chance to visit with Dr. Polking last week, and as you'd expect, Dr. Polking's time is in high demand. So Caitlin got right down to business with some of the most important questions livestock farmers are asking right now.
Dr. Polking, thank you so much for joining us today. First, could you tell us more about the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship's Meat and Poultry Inspection Bureau, and what is your role within the Bureau?
Iowa Meat and Poultry Inspection Bureau, we provide inspection services to the small and very small plants around the state. Some of those are custom exempt establishments that perform processing services for the owners of those animals and return products to them. Some are what we call official or state inspected establishments that can produce products with the Iowa mark of inspection for sale. My role in the Bureau, I am the Bureau Chief, so I have the honor of heading up that program and overseeing our staff.
And I know that you also recently worked with our Iowa Farm Bureau Farm Business Manager, Amanda, to come up with an easy-to-read graphic to give farmers a top-level idea of what types of regulations are in place when selling direct to consumers. Because of the pandemic creating bottlenecks in our food supply chain, a lot of customers have been seeking out that more direct route, which means there could be a lot of first times, not just for consumers buying, whole hogs or whatnot, but for farmers selling that animal. So could you break down for us what the regulations are for farmers selling direct to consumers and maybe some of those common misperceptions you have been seeing out there on direct marketing?
For farmers who are looking to market directly to consumers, there's really two major options. You can sell live animals or a share in a live animal, such as a half or quarter, to one or more buyers. That is then processed through the custom exemption, and those products are then returned to those buyers, those new owners. The other route is to have animals processed under inspection at one of our official lockers, and this would allow you to sell individual cuts or to sell meat products after the fact. There's kind of a couple of key points that play into this, and maybe this speaks to your misperceptions. With that custom processing route, it is extremely important that those buyers be identified prior to the slaughter date. To do otherwise, to try to sell that product after the fact, that is sale of uninspected meat, and that actually is a crime. So it's not a route that you want to go down. It's very important with custom that it be a live animal. Beyond that, if you are going through the sale of inspected cuts and you'd like to get into the retail business, it's also important to discuss retail licensing with our counterparts over in Department of Inspections and Appeals, Food and Consumer Safety Bureau. They handle licensing of retailers, restaurants, farmers market stands, etc. So they would be the license issuing authority for someone looking to do those direct sales.
So then you have an option, you can sell a live animal, and then it's that buyer's responsibility to get it processed.
That's correct. The producer can make arrangements for processing, but they do need to provide the names of those buyers when the animal is dropped off.
And then for selling individual cuts, there's going to be a couple different things that have to happen. So that animal has to be processed under a locker that has state inspection
Or
and
federal inspection,
or
correct.
federal inspection. Okay. And that farmer has to have a retail licensing.
That would be correct, yes.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that I understand because I've seen a lot of different things out there, and that graphic that we talked about really helped break it down. But it does seem like there's some like subtle nuancing sometimes to what's possible, and like you said, what's legal, which is important to know. This is new for a lot of people, right?
Correct.
And I've read online or even heard like anecdotally about people who are buying or splitting a whole animal with friends or family for the first time. So on that consumer end, they're trying to navigate what's possible and they're asking those questions of farmers who may be getting these types of questions for the first time. So if a farmer is unsure or has additional questions while navigating these opportunities, what is a reliable place they can turn to with those questions on selling livestock outside of their normal marketing chains?
Obviously, we would be a good option on that, and we're happy to answer those questions, especially if you've read that preliminary guidance or flowcharts and what you'd like to do doesn't quite fit neatly into one of those scenarios. There are also resources through ISU Extension, other university extensions, through trade groups such as American Association of Meat Processors or the Niche Meat Processors Assistance Network or Iowa Meat Processors Association here in Iowa.
Yeah, and also because of the influx of questions livestock farmers have been facing with the many challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic, some farmers have also been reaching out to the Iowa Resource Coordination Center. Can you tell us more about that new support center?
Sure. Resource Coordination Center has been answering questions from anything from mental health support to euthanasia questions to alternative marketing and other options. So they're providing this broad spectrum of services and resources for livestock producers throughout this crisis. For us specifically, we are fielding those questions that pertain to direct sales of meat products or to starting a meat processing business.
I know on Facebook, I've seen posts from local farmers who have found success in saying, hey, on this day, I'm selling hogs for this amount. Here's what our care program has been, and, bring your own clean trailer for hauling. So some have been able to sell off some of their animals that way. And I was also invited to a Facebook group that helps match farmers with consumers looking for a half hog or quarter beef, in Iowa. So we know farmers are out there and they're doing their absolute best to make this all work. And I wondered if you had heard of any creative, but legal success stories of farmers marketing their animals in less traditional ways.
I think we've certainly seen more of what you're talking about here as this goes on. And again, it is legal for a producer to market a live animal. They cannot provide the service of slaughter and processing that requires licensing as a custom establishment, but you may sell a live animal, and that buyer may then process it for themselves, and that is perfectly within the rules. Um, I think we've seen over the years or recent years, especially as any interest in local food grows, there's opportunities such as community supported agriculture, co-ops, or the like. Finding the distribution network to break into some of those markets is usually one of the challenges with building a direct marketing type business.
And I'm glad that you bring up the local foods aspect because that kind of leads me into my next question of switching gears here. So, in the short term, we know that even local meat lockers have also been overwhelmed with orders. And in this podcast episode, my colleague Corey talks with Terry Kerns at Edgewood Locker, who says they're running at 100% capacity and they're booked out until next year on taking orders. And we know they're not the only ones. There was a story on local news too about the Milo Locker, who has a retail storefront and they're being sold out of product every day. And I keep seeing stories like that. So, I mean, we don't have a crystal ball to know whether this buy local meat trend will continue, but it does seem to have generated interest in opening more lockers in Iowa's rural communities. So, for people listening who fall into that, I'm kind of interested in doing that camp. Where should they look to find out more about what that startup looks like and all the considerations it entails?
For starting a new facility, I would advise everyone to realize that a lot of that is going to be the investment in the facility and equipment itself, something that can meet the sanitary standards and is also going to work well. As far as resources, there are some wonderful documents and guidebooks through the ISU Extension Store, including a guide on designing small red meat plants that we frequently provide to those with questions. On that Niche Meat Processors Assistance Network, or NIMPAN website, nichemeatprocessing.org, they have a number of very good resources for those interested in starting up a plant. And perusing some of those resources or reading through those to get an idea of what's involved can be a great starting point. Having read some of those, if you are still interested, give us a call. We will walk you through each step of that process from your design, construction, through to operation. I would also encourage those there before you go to build a facility, look at whether there may be a current or former facility in your area that is for sale or could be renovated to suit.
And that's a good point because I've also seen a lot of things about, when people are talking about opening up lockers, like, oh, well, there's this locker that used to be in our community and the building's still there. Can we bring it back up to regulation or code or whatever it may be and get that running? So I'm sure that would also be, not having to start from scratch, another different type of opportunity too.
Correct. There are even locker owners out there who are looking for an interested person to follow them and take over that business.
Well, it'll certainly be interesting to see what happens. And, in the meantime, we know when it comes to Iowa meats that Iowa just received a green light to sell state inspected meat and poultry products across state lines when Iowa Secretary of Agriculture Mike Naig finalized the Cooperative Interstate Shipment Agreement with USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service. Would you mind elaborating more on what this means and how it may boost the sales and availability of Iowa meat?
So we're actually pretty excited about the cooperative interstate shipment. This has been over a year in the making to get this rolling, get the necessary lab equipment and all of the pieces in place. CIS, it will allow selected state inspected establishments to apply a more federal style mark of inspection and to ship products across state lines. What that also means is that livestock producers looking to do direct marketing and to ship products out of state can also have their animals processed through a selected establishment and then will be able to take those products across state lines.
Well, that sounds like a really great opportunity. And Dr. Polking, you've given us some great information here. Is there anything that I haven't asked or any other common questions that you've been getting that you think would be important for our farmers to hear?
I think your questions have pertained or followed pretty well some of the questions that we've been getting. They've mostly concerned either direct marketing or how to set up a custom locker type business. I would encourage anyone who is looking at either of these routes to do their research, to develop a business plan. It can be a tough industry to get into, it can be rewarding, but good planning will make that process a lot easier. And as always, we're happy to answer questions and to work with anyone that's interested.
Great, thank you. And what's the best way to get in touch with all of you?
Our contact information, emails, etc., is up on our website. There's Iowa Meat and Poultry Inspection Bureau under Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. For anyone that's interested, our main phone line into the office is 515-281-3338.
Well, again, we certainly appreciate Dr. Polking's time and her thoughts on some not so easy to answer questions. Hopefully, we answered some of your questions and maybe even sparked some follow-up ones. For those follow-up questions, I'd urge you to call on the Iowa Resource Coordination Center, which is the hotline that IDALS, Iowa State Extension, and Iowa pork producers are encouraging livestock farmers to call if they have any questions about how to deal with supply chain disruptions. Their phone number is 515-725-1005. Again, that number is 515-725-1005, and their website is iowafarmerhelp.com. If you have any questions that pertain specifically to inspection requirements for direct marketing, you heard Caitlin and Dr. Polking refer to a flowchart graphic developed by Iowa Farm Bureau that provides some basic answers. That flowchart is linked to the notes for this podcast episode, so you can click to view it there. You also just heard Dr. Polking welcome you to contact the Iowa Department of Agriculture's Meat and Poultry Inspection Bureau with questions about the specific requirements for direct marketing or opening a locker. And that number is 515-281-3338. Okay, we're nearing the end of this episode. I know that was a lot of information to get through, but I want to remind you of a critical relief program that's available to farmers right now. It's the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, also known as CFAP. This relief program for farmers is being administered by USDA and is taking applications now. So for details on how to sign up, go to Farmers.gov/CFAP or call your county FSA office. Well, that's it for this episode of The Spokesman Speaks. I'm Delaney Howell, and if you picked up something useful from this episode, I sure hope you'll subscribe to the podcast and join us for our next regularly scheduled episode on June 15th. Until next time, I hope you stay safe, protect your loved ones, and find new ways of responding to the challenges of feeding our neighbors in Iowa and all around the globe. Thanks for reading The Spokesman, and thanks for listening to The Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to The Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcasts and articles from The Spokesman at iowafarmbureau.com/spokesman. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews and welcome your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.